You probably all know by now that if you do a kind of classic style of story with a twist, you're going to probably pique my interest. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will be talking about the Tome of Haren by Damien, the first book in the Keeper Chronicles. This is a book the author did send me this review copy of all the way from Australia, and I think I mentioned in my wrap-up too that I realized after I opened it, it was signed and personalized, which was really nice too. But we're going to talk about this one today, and this is going to be one of those times where I have a lot of positives, and then I also do have a lot of negatives, so I think what I'm going to do is going to start. I'm going to talk about the positives, all the things I liked about this, then I'm going to get into the negatives, and then kind of do a wrap up, because I don't want this to feel like it's an overly negative review, because this is a book that I enjoyed and had a good time with, so we're gonna break it up like that. So, as I alluded to in the introduction, this presents as a pretty classic type of fantasy story, where we're doing the chosen one hero's journey kind of trope is the way this is presented, but very quickly we see that it's not quite that simple. It's not necessarily just that, oh, this person is the chosen one and we've been waiting 1,000 years for them. It's a lot more complicated than that, and on their own journey as well, we have kind of a mishmash of the type of people there, because we've got not just the normal kind of journey, we do some of that kind of hero's journey type thing, but we have a wide variety of characters and places we go. Some things that feel a little reminiscent maybe of other things, but everything doing kind of its own unique thing, which I thought was really well done. And the other thing that this book does that's pretty different than what you see with a lot of that kind of story is that we also have quite a few POVs from other characters as well. So we have our main character, Ador, who's the one that's kind of leaving, and then we also have Hessa, Tal, and Lila, who they're all friends from the same orphanage. And so we start with that, orphan kid going off, but then also we're looking at all three of them as they're also trying to make their way in the world, and they all have pretty important plot lines that are going on also. So we're getting a wide variety of the characters, what they're actually doing, and how they then become involved in those things, which keeps it interesting as well, because usually you have, maybe they would have gone with and then kind of discovered, but no, we really have Ador going off with a group of people, but not with these people, and everybody is starting to separately, for the most part, become developed and go with their characters there. So I thought that those elements worked really well, and it was enjoyable, and like I said, just didn't go quite the normal route with everything. Also introduces a really interesting for the kind of the villain, and the landscape here too is a keeper basically is supposed to be like the defender of the nation that this starts in and takes place, and comes from like only there can only be one keeper basically, but they're like descended from the ancient keepers who had powers over time and that kind of thing is how it's set up. But we have kind of the landscape is Narian, the country we start in, is on the verge of war with another country as well. And then we have this guild of assassins that are also kind of magical called Blooders that are introduced, and there's lots of different kinds of them, which I thought was interesting as well, because they all have different specialties, use different kinds of weapons, and so you did get some of that. It's really easy to go too far with that kind of thing and make it feel like a video game, or oh, this person with these weapons, but it was done in a way to make it pretty interesting that we have the different of kinds of people, different classifications in this order of these magical assassins, and makes it a pretty convincing group of villains to have involved in the story as well, kind of on all fronts, while also setting up once again the war, and we do get some look at kind of the tensions between the two countries as well. So definitely worked well there as well. Now let's talk about some of the negatives, because like I said, I do definitely have some as well, and so I do want to mention those things and be balanced here. The first thing I will say is this book is too long. It's technically, the page count in here is 550 ish. It's a little longer than that. I think it was almost 600. Anyway, around 550, 600. Kindle actually recognizes it as almost 1,000 because it's got very small print. And so it's a big book. It takes a while to get through, and I think one of the big things that this book could really benefit from is content editing. And I'm not saying like normal like line by line editing, typos, that kind of thing. There are a few throughout, but it was really not that bad. Usually, if I have a book where there's quite a lot of them, I'll even keep tracks. I'm like, oh man, I'm seeing tons of stuff. The editing was pretty good here, but I feel like a content edit would have really helped, because the first half especially, there's quite a few cases where it just seems like there's a bit of repetitive writing, or we're saying something and then like the next page we're reiterating it, or just kind of saying the same thing, and that kind of happen. And those kinds of things, especially when it's a very long story, just start to wear on you. So that's definitely something I think that could be improved upon here, as well as just I feel like the story itself probably could have been expedited a little bit. So that it was just to cut down on the length a little bit, because it's not like there's a whole bunch of filler or anything like that in here that I'm saying like, oh, you could cut half the book. That's not the case. I just think some things could have been expedited a little bit more, cleaning up the language a little bit, and the prose to make it a little bit more streamlined. And take that out would have made it a bit shorter. Probably could then have the font bigger, and then go that. On the same note as kind of the style of it. There are a few times where the POVs take place at different times, where like you'll have an event happen with one POV, and then several chapters later you go to a different POV before that event happened. And I think the way that those were arranged sometimes was a little odd. And there was only one that really didn't seem to fit, and I was really curious how it was supposed to fit into the actual plot. The others were just that they weren't really grouped together. And normally that's was generally fine, but at parts of the story we have several POVs who are together. And so we're talking about the same event 2-3 different times, several chapters apart, and it just kind of felt a little off for me. So that was definitely something I think that could be improved here as well. The prose itself, I'll say, is fine. It's a little simple for my tastes, and I don't want to sound like a prose snob or anything. It's definitely not bad. It's just it's a little simple, and I feel like that's part of it too. Is when you're using simpler prose, I feel like that makes it more noticeable when things repeat. If you're not like using different words or more, a more complex prose type thing. If you're rephrasing things in a different enough way, I feel like it's less noticeable to me. But when it's on the simpler side, you kind of get that. So those really were my main critiques on kind of the style or the book itself. The only other thing I would mention is that it did feel like some of the characters just kind of fell into roles kind of abruptly on their character journeys and that arc as well. And for the most part, it didn't really bother me. It seemed like it was kind of sudden for a bit, but it also, you see the characters, going through and figuring out how to be who they are and do the things that they're going to do. I'm phrasing this weirdly because I don't want any spoilers for this review. But so there was a little bit of that kind of just also felt like, that was a little bit of quick, but it also was an enjoyable enough story that didn't bother me a whole heck of a lot either. So a lot of interesting things here as well. I should have actually mentioned though, now that I think about it, because I was giving the instruction, it's called the Tome of Haren, so I should probably tell you what the Tome of Haren is. The Tome of Haren is a magical book that apparently you can basically go and get all kinds of knowledge. It just like collects knowledge from around it, and so it's something that we have people going to try to find, and the enemies also want to find it because they'll be able to get lots of information, secrets about the other country help in war, and kind of the bigger picture as well. And so that's what the Tome of Haren is as well. It's pretty central to the plot, so I don't know why I neglected to mention that, but that's that. So overall, kind of coming in with the positive and the negative, Tome of Haren was an enjoyable book. I did enjoy this. It was a fun story. The characters had a lot of good interactions. They had nice arcs. This did do a lot of things where the characters definitely grew. Not everybody had really fully realized where they were going or what they were going to do because it is a series, but everybody had an arc. They had some growth as we were going through the story, and we had some other kind of side POVs that I felt like did some interesting things as well. Like I said, I think this is a bit too long, and at the end it felt like it maybe went a little longer than it needed to at that point as well, and that there are just some general content things. I think you see this a lot. It's a book that feels like a debut, and it is a debut, and so I try not to hold that against authors too much, because whether you're reading self-pub or trad pub, you can often tell, not always, but you can often tell when you're reading a debut because it just feels like a debut. And sometimes you're reading a book that's not, and it feels like it. And that's especially negative in that case. It's like, oh, this author's published several books, and this feels like a first book. So this feels like a debut. But it was a fun and enjoyable story. I think definitely, like I said, if you like the kind of some of the classic tropes, but with different takes on them and some twists on that, where it's just not the same thing, because this definitely didn't feel derivative. It's you can definitely see it feels like that kind of classic fantasy type of story, but doing some different things. If you like that kind of thing, this would definitely be one that you'd want to check out and may work for you as well with it. So that is my review and my thoughts on the Tome of Haren by Damien Francis. Let me know in the comments if you've read this or you've heard of this. I know when I mentioned before, some other people were going to be reading it, so I'm not sure if those people have or not. But let me know your thoughts on that below, and always love to have those conversations. That's it for this one, though, so make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description, as always, for the Wizardly Do a Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, any books, really anything at all. It is a lot of fun, and we would love to have you. And, of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.